Did you connect with Riley?
No.
All right, James, thank you for being with us today here on Court TV Live. What's your first impression listening to testimony by her boyfriend that she spent hours with on the phone and FaceTime and texting?
Well, we know why that phone never went through, because she was dead at this point, and in an attempt to bury her. So, just really impactful testimony. And what it does is it places the defendant, Andy McCauley, in the room of the victim prior to the time as she is killed. And it is the final nail in the coffin with the circumstantial evidence that's been presented that is likely to result in a guilty verdict here.
I can't even imagine how this boyfriend must be feeling. And I just want to reiterate the reason that we've been listening to his testimony there in court live today and not showing him is because that was the judge's order based on age at the time that this all happened. But James, the evidence about the text. Now, we know that they were shown to the jury and the boyfriend also read them, and "I'm scared, babe," and then he deleted another text. And then when he did learn of those, he took them immediately to the police department. Do you think at any point in time the boyfriend might have been a person in interest in this case?
Well, potentially, but, remember, he's on a bus to Washington, D.C. the next day, which is pretty far from West Virginia. So it would be unlikely that he would have left his house in the middle of the night. So if he was a person of interest, he was probably fairly quickly eliminated because his alibi would have, just made it impossible for him to have committed any murder. And let's not forget what the beginning of that text message says. Andy, the defendant, is in my room and I'm scared, and he hears her in the room. So while he might have been a person of interest, it was pretty clear that Andy McCauley is where the investigation should focus on.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. All right, so now let's turn our attention to the fact that this is a 15-year-old girl in her room. That's the last that anyone hears from her via that text. Strategy. Let's talk about trial strategy. Is it significant to you that this is the last piece of testimony that the state chose to present? Because it is compelling testimony, and this is the last thing in terms of the evidence that the jury will hear from the state.
Absolutely. And in tuning into the first couple days of trial, I mean, it was very dry. You had a lot of investigatory state police witnesses who were necessary to lay the foundation of the evidence that does exist, the circumstantial evidence tying Mr. McCauley to this crime. But this is, as a trial lawyer, you want your Friday afternoon witness to be something that the jury is thinking about all weekend. And they really did a great job in terms of the timing and allowing the jury to leave that courtroom with probably a pretty unabiding sense that they're going to find for a guilty verdict. Of course, the defense goes on next week, and we'll see what they present, but they'll be hard-pressed to overcome some of the evidence we've heard in this trial.
Yeah, and James, I agree with you. They delivered. The state did today when that was the last testimony presented before they rest. Now, the prosecutors throughout this trial have really been meticulously laying out a lot of damning evidence against the defendant, as you just pointed out, James. Today, we heard testimony from 2 West Virginia state forensic analysts who testified to DNA evidence found in Riley's room and her belongings, as well as under her fingernails.
Did you identify what that item is for the jury?